Hello, welcome to Trology. The concept is the dispositor theory. What is this dispositor theory? According to this theory, the planet placed in any sign will be more effective if its dispositor is stronger. A good planet will be placed in a good sign. She took it. That planet will be supported. Like I own a house and people live there. If I have strength, I will make sure that my guests are comfortable. They will get everything they want. If I have the strength, I will make sure that my guests are very comfortable. They are getting everything they want. If I am weak in this capability, then I will not be able to provide them what they want, and they will take over my house. So, in a way, my strength will ensure that my guests are getting what they want. The theory says that any planet placed in my house or any planet placed in any sign has a strong dispositor, and that dispositor becomes your friend and is strong. It supports you. This friendship is very important, and the strength of the planet. For example, if the moon is placed in the sign of the sun and the sun is strong, there is a natural friendship between the two. The sun will make sure that the moon is comfortable in their house to the best sensibility. Now, the burning qualities as of the moon in sun's house are reducing. Surya can't do anything. Similarly, if Mercury is placed in the sign of Mars and Mars is very strong, Mars doesn't really care about Mercury's comfort or convenience. They will make sure their strength will ensure what Mars has in its own house. They will make sure their strength will ensure what Mars has in its own house. Friendship and enmity among planets really matter. Now let's move a little further with this concept. Just like in astrology, a lot of importance is given to the nakshatras. Nakshatra links to that peacock sign. In the same way, in the Meena Nadi, the strength and weakness of the planets are ultimately defined by the nakshatras. The signs that are the primary lords only talk on a surface level. Rather, the nakshatras and the primary lords convey things on a subtle and deep level. In this concept, the principle of enmity is important. What is the main role of a woman? It's that we can convey as much as possible just by looking at the mother chart, the D1 chart, without going into the divisional charts. The more certainty we can express about whether this planet will fit or whether it will receive support or not, it will be better if they catch that nakshatra from there. So basically, the nakshatra of the planet will indicate in a more promising way how much indirect support system the planet is receiving and from where. In this, along with friendship and enmity, there are other important concepts. Let's talk about this. So the dispositive theory of the Meena Pisces woman speaks that not just the signs, but the nakshatras also say a lot, or even more. The signs only talk on a surface level. So, the strength of the nakshatra is that any planet is in any nakshatra. The strength and weakness of the nakshatra lords provide the planets with interactive strength or resilience, or they can also provide weakness. But if I am in a certain nakshatra and my nakshatra lord is weak, then it is indirectly impacting me. The first concept is being Digbali, not of the nakshatras, but whose Digbali we are talking about. Let's understand through an example. It won't be understood like this. For example, Mars is best placed in the nakshatra of a debilitated Jupiter. Now, the nakshatras under Jupiter are Punarvasu, Vishakha, and Purva Bhadrapada. If Mars is placed in any of these three nakshatras, and Jupiter is placed in the 10th house, in the 10th house, Jupiter is not Digbali, but Mars is Digbali in the house. Let's also talk about which planet is Digbali where. So both the planets of knowledge, Jupiter and Mercury, are Digbali in our rising sign, and the Moon and Venus are both Digbali in the 4th house. As comforting planets, Saturn is Digbali in the 7th house, and the Sun and Mars, being go-getter fiery planets, are Digbali in the 10th house. And for Rahul, we will take Saturn's position, meaning we will consider the 7th house. And for Ketu, we will place Mars in the 10th house. When it comes to being Digbali, if Jupiter is placed in the 10th house, then indirectly it is doing what Mars wants to do. Here, this is a slightly different concept. They are in that position of Mars, where Mars is benefiting. So now, Mars is getting strength through Jupiter. This is the first concept in which we are talking about strength through Digbal. What does Digbali mean? These weak planets are finding direction. The planets aren't lost. Mars, sitting in these signs and Nakshatras, is weak, but Jupiter guides them to success. To do what they want means that the planets don't feel lost. So it could be that Mars, sitting in these signs and Nakshatras, feels weak otherwise, but through Jupiter, they will find success. Just like we considered friendship and enmity very important in the case of the rising sign's lord, in the same way, friendship and enmity will be equally important in the case of the Nakshatra's lord, like Saturn. If Saturn is in the Bharani constellation, it's considered weak, so we assess its strength or Mars's strength. If Venus is strong, it affects Saturn's assessment. According to this concept of sign dispositor, since Saturn is placed in the Bharani constellation, if Venus is strong, there is friendship between the two. Now Saturn will receive support through Venus, and there are also reasons for the cancellation of Saturn's weakness through Venus. Let's say, in this case, Venus is placed in the 7th house, where Saturn gets dignity. It is also exalted there. So even Saturn is looking very weak, but it has gained a lot of strength. In the 7th house, Saturn's weakness is cancelled. Venus holds the burden. You lift Saturn. So who is holding the burden? Venus is holding it, and you are lifting Saturn. Many factors work. Your constellation dispositor should rule good houses. Functional nature is key. It would also be good here that the planet giving you strength, which is your constellation dispositor, rules good houses as well to improve our performance, because their ultimate intention is good. When we talk about analysis, if the sun is placed in any constellation of Mercury, what is the main function of the sun? Planting our desires brings gains, and the rulership of Mercury is good. That this line is loud. There isn't much animosity between the two. Mercury is considered a friend of the sun, so its rulership is also good. Now, the strength of Mercury will ensure that whatever people want, they can generally get their work done and produce gains. Now, as much as we have discussed about marriage, the more things we see that seem to be happening in it, like my name, is becoming Nakshatra, the Lord of Dignity, in which Venus was giving an example. There is also friendship, meaning the functional nature is good. Now, whatever results we get here will be more positive. You will start meeting here with Saturn or any planet. We need to keep both the natural signification and rulership in mind. Here, you will get better results from the planets. It won't be as weak as it appears. We understand all these points and examples through some cases. Only then will these principles be explained. Look at this chart. Let's discuss this net's married life. Saturn and Venus are in 7th. First of all, where is the ascendant lord? The ascendant lord is in the 7th house, and Mercury is a friend, but the 3rd lord is with the sun. So obviously, there will be many options, ups and challenges in life. I will face those challenges with full strength. And Saturn and Venus are in my 7th house. Both are significators for my ascendant. That's a very good thing. This means that I will be providing love to my partner, and even after my marriage, something like this will happen. But we should also pay attention to this. Saturn is also the lord of the 8th house, and it has nothing to do with relationships. It brings boredom there. Saturn is related to the 7th house and Venus, which is the natural significator of romance, which is placed in my 7th house, the 12th house, with enemies, and in a burnt sign. According to the concept we understood today, my focus should be on who the lord of Jupiter's Nakshatra is. The lord of Jupiter's sign is like the sun. They are friends. That's a good thing. But where is the lordship of the sun? The sun's lordship is third one. The lordship is not very good. Where is the placement of the sun? Sun is placed in the 8th house. The house in which sun is placed is very close to the position of Jupiter. Jupiter is directional in the ascendant, is in the 7th house. This house is near their direction. However, it is not close to their directional position where the sun is placed. Sun is above Jupiter. Where the sun is placed, Jupiter is with the sun. If in Moon or Mars, it gets support from Mars. Jupiter is weak, but might get. Now, if Jupiter were in the constellation of the Moon or Mars, especially in the constellation of Mars, it would receive indirect support through Mars. However, Mars's lordship isn't very good. For Jamna rising, Mars supports, check the ascendant chart, and Jupiter's constellation. That's why they provide support. Wherever Jupiter is, near its directional position. For these reasons, look at the ascendant chart and also check the lord of Jupiter's constellation. It is confirmed that their marital life is not very good. There are many challenges and struggles in that. In this case, we will also talk about the 7th house lord Jupiter. When we looked at the constellation of Jupiter and its lord, we found out that the situation is getting worse. Let's talk about their marriage. Rahu is placed in their 7th house, and it is in a friendly sign. Talking about the 7th house from the moon chart, the 7th lord is retrograde, along with Venus and the sun. The 7th lord being retrograde, Venus being a red pro-planet, and also having a dual sign placement with Mercury, along with the dual sign in the 7th from the ascendant, the placement of Rahu and my 7th lord being in the Ashwini constellation, shows a kind of duality because Ashwini is also a significator of duality. The constellation has its own qualities and characteristics. Who is the lord of the 7th house? What are the traits of the constellation? And how will they influence my 7th house? But today we are talking about Jupiter being in the Ashwini constellation, which is ruled by Ketu. I am seeing a lot of problems at the service level. It seems that there will be no stability in duality, relationship, etc., etc. But because Jupiter is in the constellation of Ketu, Jupiter gains directional strength. Despite problems, Jupiter is getting direction and support. It is in such constellations and it should be looked at. Despite all these problems and challenges, Jupiter is getting direction and support to safeguard the chart and protect his house, which is the 4th and 7th. So ultimately, it is in such constellations, and it should definitely be looked at once. Before saying that your situation looks completely deteriorated, let's talk about Venus, which has a very interesting chart. Before saying that your situation looks completely deteriorated, all right, here we talk about Venus, which has a very interesting chart. To explain this concept, I will also talk about failure. Just like when we discuss any principle, we mostly refer to the charts that seem relevant to our discussion, and we don't really talk about those charts. The concept doesn't seem that good, but we should think about how to approach it or what we don't know. You need to keep in mind, and I will talk about it as well. Now, let's talk about money matters. Rahu is in 11th. When I talk about the special gauge, Rahul is quite good in the Kamatrikona house in terms of signs. They are very good for the mind. Where is my 11th lord? It is in that house, in an enemy sign, and is with the sun and Mercury. However, they are forming a wealth yoga together with the sun because the 5th lord is associating with the ninth lord. Mercury is between. So multiple sources of games are coming through a house. It comes into view and there is respect for Jupiter. But Venus seems weak because there is no friendship between the Sun and Venus, and they haven't been placed well in the house. And what you see is that the enemy house is also present, so some kind of loss or struggle is also visible. But we should focus on knowing who the Lord of Venus's constellation is. The Lord of Venus's constellation is Saturn, which is placed in the Pushya constellation, and Saturn is positioned in the fourth house. That is the position of Venus's directional strength, and in that sign, Venus is also exalted, and there is friendship between Venus and Saturn. When it comes to money matters, Saturn also has lordship over the second house. If I talk about lordship, then all factors come into play here. And she is a filter. So, when it comes to any house and house, Lord, you should definitely look at what its constellation is saying. Each house has a constellation with unique traits. Discussing Pisces woman, planet strength, and constellation support. Let's discuss Saturn. Look at the strength of the house as well. Today we are talking about the Pisces woman, judging the strength of the planet and how its constellation lord is supporting you through friendship, enmity, lordship, and the directional strength of your chart. Let's talk about Saturn in this context. The ascendant lord going into the 12th house, the second lord going into the 12th house, and Rahu's moon going into the second house are both significators of fluctuation. Rahu is a significator of money, and it is placed with the moon, which is the seventh lord, so money is coming in through business, and that is indeed happening. But with fluctuation from the first and second lord going into the 12th house and becoming retrograde, travel, business, and dealings are all happening in their life. Retrogression also affects sources of income. So everything is happening. The Lagna Lord going into the 12th house affects health. Mars looking at your Lagna. Especially when Mars, in its debilitation, is looking at your Lagna and a good planet for your Lagna. Saturn is placed in the constellation of Venus. Venus is in the 7th house. Venus is key, and Saturn's friend, we must assess Venus's strength. Venus is the significator planet for this chart and is also a friend of Saturn. Having said that, we also need to see how strong Venus is in itself. Venus is with the debilitated Mars. Venus in enemy. So they are definitely providing indirect support to Saturn, and we need to see how much support they can provide. How strong is Venus for that? That's important. But our first rule in Meena Nadi, and the most important rule regarding directional strength, is that Venus is definitely marking 100% in that. To support Saturn. So, when it comes to matters of the first house and the second house, Saturn will receive support through Venus, which will provide direction and guidance. Look at this chart. This is the chart of Shah Rukh Khan. Now, when we look at the Lagna, the Lord, and the Sun in debilitation, the first thing that comes to our mind is that there will be a lack of confidence in them. Your consumption is flawed. Even Saturn, which is your enemy, is so strong that it is looking at your Lagna. Regarding the 4th house, it should be noted that one may not be able to face the camera. So when facing people, you take them for granted. Such thoughts will come to our mind when the Sun is in debilitation. People you work across take you for granted. But if we look at it, the Sun is placed in the constellation of Rahu, and we need to see where Rahu is blessed. Rahu is placed in the 10th house where the Sun receives directional strength. So, indirectly, the Sun is getting support through Rahu when it comes to that. So, fame and media. When I was talking about failures, we had discussed Shwenaraji's chart last time. Regarding the debilitated sun in the second house, it is placed in the constellation of Rahu because I mentioned that you need to consider the planet's lordship and its natural placements as well. So, when we look at the sun in debilitation, yes, we definitely say that. It affects vitality, father, confidence, status, and public image. All of these will take a hit. Now, because it is in the constellation of Rahu in the second house, and Rahu is placed in the fourth house of their chart, where the sun is seen as 0. If Rahu shows the sun as 0, what it indicates is that the planet I have, which is placed in that constellation, has its lord in the house where I am seen as 0. So, the significations of the sun, which are related to the 12th house, or their confidence, there is no doubt about it. She is a very confident lady. In fact, she is an example for all ladies. But do these principles fail in such cases? Now we don't know how. Intact and secure. All the significations of the sun are internally, but definitely when we look at the constellation lord of a planet or its dispositor, we should definitely ask which area is being impacted. So, next time, whenever you are judging a planet's dispositor, before looking at the state and lordship, make sure to look at the constellation lord 100% to tell someone from where and how you are going to get direction in life. Thank you so much.